Hello, here we go with our next Stump the Professor group from the team Pineapple Pizza, which I think is an adorable name, especially since I just binged watched all of Stranger Things to get ready for season 5 to come out. And I really like the Pineapple Pizza line in that. I'm definitely not going to try and quote it. I'm a fangirl, but I'm not that in big of a fangirl to know the exact quote. So anyway, this group has actually 3.5, maybe 4.5. There was a lot of discussions in here about different little avenues to go with where to go with the questions, and I really appreciated the way you all worked together to find the best ones. The first question, how do you convince someone that conflict resolution isn't a technical problem? This had a delightful story with it where one of the team members described talking to someone who's not in the class about the class, and that student said, oh, something to the effect, that's easy, that's just like fixing a wash machine, you just replace the belt and everything works again. And so the question is really coming from like, how do you respond to that? Like, we've been learning things, a lot of things about conflict, and it is not, I think, like the fact that you had the reaction, like that what you have learned is much more complicated than can be just narrowed down to that one little metaphor of fixing a washing machine. Uh, so I kind of want to help everyone in the class to really be able to represent the complexity of what we're dealing with or how complicated it is. And I think of complexity and complicated as two different things. Those of you who've taken the organizational communication class, we get into the weeds on that, which I actually felt was like part of the answer to this was actually some of the things we discuss in conflict in my organizational communication class when we deal with Cynefin theory. So if someone is, so let's just talk about the fact that this person is really approaching conflict as a technical problem. And what we've been learning in this class is that conflict is a little bit more than a technical problem. It is a relational thing that we are managing relationships, and people are people and machines and technical is a little bit is different. Those are different things. So it's not surprising. I think in the story you mentioned that maybe this person who said this came from a human resource background. And human resource is going to approach conflict and problems in a process as a process goal. We talked about that in week 3. Process goals, some people lean right in like we're going to resolve this conflict by going to the handbook and opening it up, and this is the process done. So actually, I'm not a little surprised that they were leaning into the process goal because fixing a washing machine sounds like a that technical process, but people aren't machines. Um, so if we were to one way that you could approach a dialogue with someone, I mean, this is kind of specific to this example, but is to uh, if someone has a really idea that seems to conflict with what you've been learning in this class, is to think to really be listening to the words they're using, and then you can kind of extend it into this idea that conflict isn't fixing, right? Conflict, we are managing conflict. And in fact, I'll just be a little picky about the question itself. And how do you convince someone that conflict resolution isn't a well, in our class, we haven't been learning conflict resolution. We've been learning conflict management. And I'll just get a little picky about that, though I don't think that is the spirit of answering the question. I'm not so worried about that. But we aren't fixing in conflict. We are working to understand. We are we are trying to unravel layers, and to, even though I talk a lot about tools, which is a machine kind of metaphor language, we're really learning skills. And we want to be adaptable, appropriate, effective, and empathetic in situations and really lean into those so that we can understand that people don't break, people aren't broken, people are different, people are some people, we are all coming from different elements of cultural norms or different ways that trauma shows up. And that influences how we are experiencing the world and our worldview. So I think if you were to give a quick response to someone, I think it's good to just lean into conflict isn't a technical problem. It's really about we are in a dialogue to diagnose issues and then move in with all these communication skills we've been learning. I think mostly I just want to say conflict isn't easy. There's more to conflict than just changing the belt on a washing machine. And if you had to change the belt on a washing machine, I couldn't do that. I don't have the skills to do that. I would have to call someone for help and bring someone in who would have that technical skill to do that. And sometimes in conflicts, when we're trying to, we do need to bring third party people in to find a way to help us get things into a place of whenever we're bringing third party in, we're often trying to we've lost our way in being able to dialogue. If we need a facilitator or a mediator, remember all of those things that we are learning in week 7, Facework week, that we were trying to figure out when a third party person is needed. So there is some validity in the way this person is using the washing machine, but it needs to be expanded. It needs to also think about, if I'm in a conflict, is the other person a washing machine and I just need to change their belt? I just need to fix you and then all of a sudden my conflict is resolved? No. Maybe we could think, for some of us, if we can move into that pure conflict win-win where we're on the same team and the wash machine is representative of the problem, and then the problem, we need to diagnose the problem. Why is the spin cycle off? Why is it banging and making so much noise? We need to now be on the same team to diagnose, define, and then move into all the steps it takes to fix the machine or fix the problem. But we definitely don't want to think of, I'm in a conflict with a machine and I need to fix you to fix my conflict, right? Like that, nope, I'm going to definitely call foul on that penalty on the play there. That is not going to work. Oh, did I just mix metaphors? Sorry about that. Um, it's football season, so it seems to work out okay. I hope that makes sense what I'm trying to say with this idea. Uh, when that question was coming up, there was also kind of this idea of what's your pitch for what you've been doing in this class, right? Like what has been going on that we are what have you been doing and how do you're about ready to go into holidays and people like, oh, what have you been studying? Oh, I studied a conflict management class. Oh, what's that class about? Right? Well, you can really define that you learned that conflict is uh, conflict management is different than conflict resolution, and that I learned about how to take care of myself and take care of others when there's a disagreement or oh, there's just some people I could just never talk to. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you were, how can you even dialogue? That sounds well. We also learned a lot about emotional regulation and not fixing other people and not trying to convince other people. And it's a very complex thing. Conflict is complex. So, those are some things I think as you come to the last assignments of the class, I'm kind of asking you for your pitch of what you've been learning as you bring together the most important skills you've been learning. Okay, so good first question. I hope that gives you some talking points. Also, you should not convince someone that their metaphor is wrong, right? Or that, nope, I've been studying conflict, you're wrong, I'm right. That is going to really escalate things quickly, and then you'll wonder if you learned anything in the class. Instead, joining and expanding is probably the best way to dialogue with someone. Um, I think one of the things I liked about this team's questions is that I really felt like a lot of what I teach in OL 633 in my organizational communication class would be great answers for this team. I felt like most of you were kind of leaning in organizational dynamics, and I can't wait for you to be in those classes. I hope I have you again so we can just build on what you've been learning. Okay, so the next thing is, hold on a second, let me get to it. How do you get someone to re-engage after stonewalling to find a resolution? Okay, I'm so picky about that word. How do you get someone to re-engage after stonewalling and like, or defensiveness where people have really dug in? So if we are knowing someone is moving into defensiveness or stonewalling, they're flooded, right? They're having a stress response to the conflict. And that's a great time to have a timeout and let's come back to this. Maybe this isn't the best time. And because if you keep insisting on leaning into trying to find I'm even if you're going at it with all your empathy skills and your validation and trying to understand and being curious, if someone is flooded, they're flooded. There's not going to be that person. The physiological state of being flooded means hearing has shut down. We're not really taking in information even visually anymore, let alone being able to self monitor, let alone other monitor what's happening with the other person. And this is when things can really escalate and feelings can get hurt. So, like calling a timeout is going to be really, really important. Um, and with like we said when we talked about Gottman's protocols for this, like with the promise of return, the promise of coming back, because the only way you can have a dialogue is with mutual willingness to engage, mutual willingness. So we need the other person to be willing to dialogue. And if so, let's say some time has passed. You talked about the team talked about this. Time has passed. We are maybe a day's gone by, a week's gone by. People left. People stormed out, and we are now in the awkward in between space. Ooh, maybe in the upside down. Sorry, I'm all Stranger Things up to here. There's a lot of there's a lot of media around this season. They're doing a good job with the marketing. Uh, so first things first, before you set the time to re-engage, you need to make sure you are self-regulated. What are you going to do? Is it a journal dump? some people like to journal and then just dump out everything they're feeling and get it all out. Find a way to process where you're at with it. You want to think about what is your goal? What's your outcome from it goes back to the other team, the good inside and the good inside and outsiders question. You know, like you really need to come in with some idea of what you're going to need out of this conversation. Uh, but it needs to have an openness to it. It can't be fixed or rigid. So once you feel ready to re-engage, that doesn't mean the other person has done the work, right? That's part of what the question is. I'm getting there. I'm getting there, I promise. Um, so we want to really think about that word re-engagement. We want to get someone back into the dialogue. So you can approach that person. The very first thing you want to say is acknowledge something for the acknowledge your part in the situation. What it can be a very small thing, just a thread of common ground, anything you can find that you can find agreement on and or acknowledge your responsibility. This is key because as soon as you acknowledge some point that the other party or parties have made, um, walls lower, right? We may not be full re-engagement yet, but it's the beginning. The next thing I'm going to say is you want to give the other person some power, right? They're flooded, they've lost, um, there's something that is lost in them that they felt like they could even be a part of a dialogue. And that's why they had this stress response, which was a survival place of being stonewalling or defensiveness. So you want to give them some power. Say, hey, it's now a good time to talk about the whatever it is. Make sure you're clear about what you're bringing up. Make it as small as possible, not how we handle family through in the holidays. Like that's really big. Maybe it's something if you have a very specific moment that you need to focus in on. So thin slice it and ask, is this a good time to discuss this? If it's not, when would be a good time? So as soon as you ask them to engage in setting the day and time, whether it's right now or not, uh, you create a container. And that container has a bit of a boundary. And getting them to buy into where do you want to meet or what time do you want to meet, things like this are really, really valuable. Communication ways. And that helps, again, we're going to get the wall a little bit lower, that stone wall. We're going to just keep lowering it with this dialogue. Uh, then you're beginning that conversation, and maybe it's right now, maybe it's the next day, whatever it is. You want to be clear about why we're having this conversation. So when you say the why, which is interests, what's your interest in this conversation? It's we have to work together on this project, and I really am interested in making sure that we can uh, be effective and do well and feel good about what we're working on. I mean, whatever it is, you have to say it out loud. And this is why you did your own work beforehand to be clear about your goals and your interests in the situation. Make sure you're putting in that people piece in there. Uh, and this hopefully is transferable, but you have to adapt it to your own situation and your own culture and your own communication style. And once you say what your why is, you need to get the mic in their hands for them. What is what do they want out of this conversation? what are they, we have to do this project, we've been assigned to each other. I really want to be successful with it. I want to feel good about what we create. What do you need out of this project? Or define it. Get that microphone in their hands and ask the good questions that get them to define their needs. If you're just monologuing, then you are giving up the ability to adapt and be appropriate and to find common ground, because you're not putting yourself in the listening. You don't have your listener hat on. And then some people take advantage of that. The conflict, they have a dramatic moment, you've re-insisted on coming back together, and then they sit there. Now prove to me that I should trust you. And they zip it up. And that's the first, and it could be under their level of awareness that they're doing this. It's just a survival tech communication survival path they've chosen in order to control the uncontrollable, which is others. And then if you get stuck in a monologuing of trying to fix the situation, and what about this? Would this work? What about this? Would this work? And they're like, nope, nope, negative, negative, negative. Uh, it brings the energy back down, and they gain more power with that. So you got to create some accountability from the other person by helping them, by getting them to dialogue. Well, I don't know what I want. I don't know. I don't know what I want. Well, you can't force them and you can't convince them to dialogue with you. You can only open the door. They're going to have to walk through it. If they're not walking through it, have a limit for yourself and take care of yourself. I have given you in this class communication skills to get you to engage and find places of managing relationships and how to adapt to other people's cultural styles, be aware of uh, trauma and childhood experiences that are shaping things. But you have that too. You have culture, you have past experiences that need to be acknowledged. And this is why you should definitely walk towards it. But that's what dialogue is. It's that mutual willingness for another person to walk towards you as well and find that space to be in, to for you to be considered as well. I hope that helps. This has a little bit of a boundary that I want you to consider. What is your boundary? And being honest about your invitation to others, and when you not escalating, not over accommodating, not here I have in my notes, uh, not trying to uh, some how do I want to say this? Some of you are in this leadership program because you've been really successful in management positions or supervisor positions or on your jobs. Whatever it is that you have found a way to be really successful because you know how to move in. And that often can be a trap if you don't take care of yourself and set a boundary. So I don't know if I'm saying that the way I want to, but it's something to consider. Where's your boundary? Where's your limit? All right, last question. Question number 3. How do you manage conflict online or text, which is how do you manage conflict in digital formats, digital online communication channels? So, yes, this is a big problem, and we have a lot of digital communication. This whole class is asynchronous. We have a lot of digital communication in this class, and it's one of the reasons why I asked for an office hour appointment with you to dialogue. I have you dialogue with each other, not just post one way, uh, asynchronous discussion boards, because the more of those type of dialogues that that you sprinkle in, the better you're going to have at interpreting tone, knowing people's personalities and style of communication, and maybe you'll get closer to interpreting their messages, but you'll never be completely accurate. Even when you know someone really well, miscommunication happens. So, and this came up in the meeting. Yeah, you don't have tone. Tone holds so much. So, as soon as you send a message in Teams or a Google chat or an email, and that person is reading it, tone is inferred by the other person. They're decoding the message from their own point of view. They're doing that in person too, but you have a little bit more of the more nonverbal channels to allow for you to encode the message effectively and appropriately in some of those nonverbal channels. Emotion might be more visible. It depends from person to person in the way we have express our emotions with facial expressions and gestures and the sounds of our voices, all the different channels. There's so many of them. I can't even go over them all in this class, but some of us are matched and some of us are mismatched. So again, it really is going to depend from person to person. So misinterpretation is going to skyrocket when you're in that asynchronous digital communication. And that's why now there's all these things to adapt your language, right? We have emojis and stickers and GIFs and all sorts of stuff that you could slap on there to make sure the emotion and tone is included in the message. Um, and that is, and even then, sometimes it gets misinterpreted. The emotional state that someone is in is how they will decode your message. And so, okay, we've defined the problem. Now, how do you manage conflict? The best thing to do if you're in an asynchronous, you send a message, receive, send a message, receive, back and forth, is to not let it escalate. If you can feel like things are starting to spiral and escalate, you need to slow it down. You need to get it into the deep freezer fast, uh, and and then shift the channel of communication to a more relational exchange. And say, hey, this is a really important topic. We probably shouldn't be discussing it through email. Let's jump on a call. I mean, even a phone call, but we have so many other ways if we are far apart from each other. So you want to uh, get everything. This is too important. We need to shift it to another uh, communication back and forth, and then we need to say why, right? There's that intention again, or our interests. uh, my goal here is to make sure that I really understand what is going on, and we can't do that just in emails. Whatever you want to say, just fill it in. uh, And then if you are trying to shift it into a more relational space, often people will avoid that. We've talked a lot about avoidance, haven't we? So a lot of people will avoid it. They'll be sick. They will be like, oh, I had traffic. It turns out I can't make it. Something happened here. Something happened here. And you do want to try and narrow the container of the getting into a conversation as soon as possible. But people are people, and you can't control another person on this. So every time you see a delay, you just reiterate, oh, thanks for letting me know. I do want to make sure I'm looking forward to when I see you again so we can talk about this. and then that's it. Because if the delay is trying to force you back into chatting and texting and email, you have you have defeated the whole thing you've been trying to do by getting it into a more relational, transactional dialogue. So you could say things like, let's keep this in the loop. Let's put it on the agenda. I mean, it depends on you know, the language of the relationship, if it's workplace versus family, whatever you need. And really keep it in a management place, not to resolve it, but just to continue the dialogue. That's going to be really important. Now, you can't, I just want to remember as we finish this last question, you can't force someone to the table. They still have to be there. So let's say they do walk into the office and you see them and you go, "Oh, good. I'm so glad you're here. I just wanted to make sure that we went over XYZ because it seemed like uh, it was really important that we were in line with this, aligned with this." And you get stonewalled from it. And you're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, but I have this meeting to go to." All right, go back to re-engagement. See if you can set a container, see if you can get them to commit to a time. But the truth is, if someone doesn't want to engage with you, someone doesn't want to engage with you. And if you have power in the situation, like if you're a supervisor, you can really make it about that and say, we need to schedule a meeting and pull the supervisor lever on it. However, in this program, we're learning about leadership, which is different than being a supervisor or a manager. And that's really important because that's a relational development skill, not just using authority and power. So think about how these levers all work together. I hope this helped the pineapple pizza team, and I look forward to hearing your responses to these when you take some notes. This is a dialogue. These aren't answers. These are responses that I have, and I look forward to what you come back with. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.